I don't know how to explain this properly, but as we get further into these, I start having like less to say, even though there's more going on. It's just a weird feeling. Maybe there's just more action sequences, or maybe it's just more stuff I already know about or already talked about. I don't know. We can see how Anakin's particular teaching style is really starting to rub off on Ahsoka. For example, the fact that she's actively seeking revenge against Bane, and admittedly held herself a little bit better this time. And, you know, that's cool and interesting. Anakin being utterly and completely casually manipulated by Palpatine, well, okay, that's typical. The fact that Palpatine pretty much cut Ahsoka out of the conversation was always kind of weird to me. It's just rude. I mean, I know he's the Chancellor and all that, but seriously? And then there's the fact that it took those two to actually figure out where he's been, rather than the two people actually going with him, which is just sort of pathetic. The one thing I really wanted to talk about is, how rich is Cad Bane? Like, I talked about this earlier, his motivations, his, my interpretation of his desire to be, just the bounty hunter who does the bounty hunting things, and doesn't actually really need the money. The fact that he has his own little private space station satellite, filled to the brim with traps, and can detonate it at a will just to get away, says a lot about his mindset. A lot of people who are, after the money or whatever, wouldn't be engaged in that kind of activity because, oh my god, all that expense thrown out the window. And yet for Bane, it was all worth it just to get away. Now, you could see the logic there, but you could also see the severe pragmatism in that kind of logic. It's just interesting, and I was curious what you guys think about that very same concept. We also see that this is the first of like 55 times where Palpatine gets really close to being found out, and through circumstances or luck, manages to avoid, anybody figuring out him. I always found that aspect of the prequels something that I felt they should have done better. The idea that everyone knows there is another Sith Lord, but they don't know anything else about them. They don't know their gender, they don't know their species, they don't know their identity, they don't know how they're operating or where they're operating from. Now, granted, Chancellor Palpatine was a little bit of an obvious choice on that one, which is probably the sad part, but, I always found that base concept to be an engaging one. Which brings me to the next point. This might actually be the most evil thing I've ever seen Palpatine do. Alright, I am going to reprogram these children through surgery in order to be my slaves. Yeah. And of course, I mean, this is my presumption, of course, that this is foreshadowing for what would eventually become the Inquisitors later on in the franchise. I always find it weird how the droids who serve the bad guys are fanatically loyal. You ever notice that? I mean, I suppose you could say the same about the droids who serve the good guys. R2 was there in the nick of time. But they go way above and beyond the Call of Duty. I suppose it's because they more or less can't avoid doing it? I don't know, it's just something that's always struck me as just a little bit weird. They basically act like zealots. And of course we get to see Mustafar. And we're going to forget that place ever existed, naturally. I mean, why would we ever go back there, am I right? I think that's all I got. And yeah, I guess we'll go ahead and move on to the next episode. So I'll see you around, guys.